Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a really great webinar to share with you all, and it is centered around field plugins and how they can extend and customize your SurveyCTO forms. So, field plugins have been a long-standing component of SurveyCTO. If you've been with us for a long time, you've probably used them before or have accessed our resources about them. If you are a little bit newer or haven't made use of them yet, they're a great way to improve what your forms can do. And whichever group you're in, Mafia and I are really happy to have you join us today. We're excited to give you both a primer or a refresher on field plugins, and then very much so looking forward to going through a demo for you all. And I'll just add that even if you have used field plugins before, we're showing something today that we have not shared before. And we're looking forward to getting into that. Before we get there, let me introduce our awesome speaker for today. Mafia is our customer research advisor at SurveyCTO with over 13 years of experience in implementing ICT for D across Africa, including Malawi, Kenya, Zambia. He has incredible technical experience, having been a developer, data analyst, data manager, systems designer, what have you. And he's also applied that technology in many different settings, including WASH, education, agriculture, climate. So safe to say, Mafia knows what he's talking about, and he's going to share that knowledge with us today. So we're in for a treat. So here is our plan for the time we have together. We'll talk about what field plugins are, what they can do, highlight some popular examples. Then for the demo, we'll not only show you how you can find and install a plugin, but how you can easily create and customize it too. And finally, we'll close out with some best practices and Q&A. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, what is a field plugin? The simplest way I can describe it is, imagine putting together a miniature web page right inside one of your form fields. That's essentially what a field plugin is. Now, why do I say a plugin is like a web page? Well, because inside a plugin, you'll find standard web files, for example, HTML for the structure, CSS for how it looks, JavaScript to make it interactive. There's also a small JSON file, a manifest file that tells SurveyCTO what kind of plugin this is. And plugins are also packaged as a single zip file. And we also call them an extension for extending existing functionality because they take a regular SurveyCTO field like a text box or a single choice question and let you replace the default appearance with your own custom design and interaction. And here's the important bit. Even though the respondent sees a custom interface, SurveyCTO still stores the answer using the original field's data type. So, for example, a plugin on a number field still saves a number. Your data then stays clean and exportable, and your other tools like Stata or Power BI don't even know a plugin was involved. And today, plugins are supported on text, integer, decimal fields, to name a few. Now, I also want to get into a little bit of why plugins as a capability exist in the first place. And the honest reason is no two data collection projects are the same. Some teams need barcode scanners, other need a way to time studies, others need rich offline maps. And we knew that from the moment SurveyCTO was created. We could try to anticipate every feature and bake it into the core platform, but you also run into a couple of problems. Like, for example, it could bloat the platform for a lot of the other users who don't need that one specific feature. Or, it could slow down the development cycle because every change has to go through full release cycles. So really, field plugins gave us a better way to do things. We keep the core platform solid, stable, but we give you, the user, a way to extend it when you need to. And to use a lighthearted comparison, you can think of the core SurveyCTO platform as the cake on the left. You love it. It's exactly what you need when you want cake. But the cake on the right, that cake has the extra icing and decorations that you can put on top of the original when you want something more. And that is how you can think of field plugins. I'll also quickly add that we now have over 50 plugins in our catalog, so you really don't need to build from scratch. And with AI tools, customizing or even building a plugin is much more accessible than it was even 2 years ago. And Mafia will show you more later on in the demo. Yeah. And speaking of which, I will hand it over to Mafia to continue.
Thanks. That was really helpful. So I'll just pick up from where Shirley has ended by talking a little about what field plugins can actually do for you. And we'd like to think about this in, I think, four broad categories. And these categories will cut across different user types, whether you're an M&E lead, a project manager, a researcher, or a developer. There's definitely something that field plugins can do for you. So with field plugins, you can firstly customize the appearance. So you can just change the looks of how a field appears. So you can adjust things like the colors, the sizes, the layouts to match whatever branding you have and to improve accessibility. So bigger fonts when you're working with low vision respondents, or if you're working in an area where they use right to left languages, you can have right to left text for it. Secondly, you can also extend the functionality. So you can add a timer to a question. You can automatically launch a phone call. So existing functionality being extended with a little extra functionality on top. And then thirdly, you can also create completely new input modes. Okay, these are modes that that are not offered by the form designer. So sliders, drag and drop ranking, tap on images, spreadsheet style, side-by-side preference comparisons, and so on and so forth. A lot of these are already available in our catalog, which we'll look at a little later on. And then you can also integrate web services. So you can pull data from online services, send a WhatsApp message, kick off a Twilio call, embed a YouTube video, generate a PDF, and so on. So if you can connect to a website, essentially you probably can connect that website to a field plugin. So the general principle here would be, if you have anything that you have wished you could see on a SurveyCTO field and allow it to do certain things, generally that could be an opportunity for a field plugin. It will be something that you can investigate to see whether you can build a field plugin out of. So the one thing that I want to plant with you, and we'll come back to this a little later on, is that you don't need to be a JavaScript expert. Okay. Even without that expertise, you can make meaningful changes. That used to be the bar previously, but as Shirley hinted, with AI tools that are available, that isn't something to worry about. we'll look at this a little later on and see how we can build that. But if you are here, if you're able to just in the chat, you can just put what your dream would be in terms of appearance changing for a service CTO field. I would be curious to look at that a little later on to just see what ideas you have. So in the chat, you can throw in some ideas there. We'll look at them maybe not during the session, but later on. But I'll be curious to see some of those ideas. Okay. So a quick reminder of the components that are in the field plugin. Because it's a web page and it's a mini version of a web page, it has similar layers to what you have in a web page. Okay, so there are 4 layers. There's the content, which is the actual text, images, whatever it is that you want to communicate or share. And then there's the structure, which is the HTML, the tags, the paragraphs, the lists, the headings, the structure that is going to appear within that particular page. And then you've got your styling, which is the CSS, controlling the colors, the sizes, and the layouts. And finally, we have the behavior. That's your JavaScript. That determines what happens when you click a button or when you type something into that particular field. And so you can see that you would put all of these together and you have a responsive plugin on your page. Now, the field plugin is just a smaller version of this. It's self-contained within a field, and you'll be able to use it from there. And so when you want to make changes, if you are technically inclined, you'll be thinking about these different pieces. The HTML is giving me the structure. So if the change I'm making is structural, you'd probably target the HTML. The CSS is giving me the presentation. So if it's about how things look, you'd target the CSS. So it's very simple to understand and to work with. Let's talk about examples. Okay, we mentioned that we've got a catalog, and the catalog has got over 50 field plugins. So we can't really go through each one of those, but what we have done is just to put clusters and just to give you a sense of what's available within our catalog. So there are field plugins that allow you to reach outside SurveyCTO. Okay, so our first example here has got the Launch WhatsApp field plugin. So your form can send a WhatsApp message at any point in the interview. Okay, and this can be useful for follow-ups, reminders, and sharing things just like a thank you message. The second one here has got a phone call. Okay, so instead of leaving the phone to dial somebody, the call happens inside the SurveyCTO application, and you can capture some information about that call, things like the duration of the call and whether it was successful or not, and so on and so forth. The third one here is a more recent direction that field plugins have taken, and it's quite exciting, which is basically AI-powered plugins. So because the plugin is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can call pretty much any modern API from inside that particular field plugin. And that means you can actually also call large language models. So teams have already started building plugins that summarize long open-ended responses on device, that generate dynamic follow-up questions that are based on respondents' answers, or be able to run a quick conversational probe before saving the final value. Okay, so obviously with LLMs, privacy and cost are considerations, but what this tells us is that this door is genuinely open. If you can describe the behavior to an LLM in plain English, you essentially can be able to wire this into your form. So we do have those examples of integrations with outside applications. Other field plugins will allow you to do timing-sensitive measurements. Okay, so 2 examples that we have here. We've got the counter with the stopwatch first, which pairs a stopwatch with a counter. So that if you want to know how many items a respondent can identify within a period of time, or how many tasks they can complete in a fixed window, that allows you to do that from within one screen. The second here shows the timed categories. Okay, this is useful for things like implicit association tests, where you need to flash items and measure response times in a precise manner. Previously, you could do some of these with a mix of different features within SurveyCTO, but the field plugin allows you to package them nicely into one field, and you're able to capture this information fairly easily. Okay, so you see these mostly in education, behavioral research, and reading or numeracy tests. Anywhere where you're asking things like how long or how many in this particular window, these would be pretty good fit. And then there are field plugins that allow you to change how the respondent interacts with a particular question. Okay, so here we can see in the first one that we have a clickable SVG, basically a clickable image. So instead of choosing from a list of items, you can click on different parts of this image to be able to record your response. So if you tap the affected area, the answer is then recorded, capturing the region which you tapped on. So this is useful if you're doing medical assessments, agricultural surveys, geographic studies, and so on. And then also the second one we're showcasing here is the ranking choices. So instead of a flat list of options, respondents are able to drag and drop the items to put them in the order that they want them to appear. This is much closer to how people would normally rank things on a day-to-day basis. So it gives you a friendlier way to ask which is your first choice, second choice, and the like. Again, this is something that could be done in a different way within SurveyCTO. The field plugin just simplifies that process a lot more. Another example is the usage of PDFs, okay, being able to bring out PDFs. And the interesting thing about this is really the idea that even though we can print these PDFs, how we came up with this field plugin was very interesting. One enterprise client came to us and said, this is the need that we have. When respondents fill out information, we want them to be able to print out a branded PDF straight from the content that is in the form without having to leave the application. And so working with the enterprise success team, they were able to build this particular field plugin. You paste your HTML field, the plugin renders it as a preview of the PDF, and then you can even download this PDF. It even gives you a bit of management. You can manage the page size, the margins, the orientation, and so on. And so essentially with this, you can find that the process is quite easy. The PDF, quite easy to build, but that journey, that idea of an idea being coming in from a client, coming through the SurveyCTO pipeline, working with them, having a final product. And if you go to our catalog, you actually find that this product is available. So you can move from something that somebody wanted to something that the community benefits from within a short period. Okay, so those are just some examples. Okay, so moving from talking about them, let's begin think about how we actually use them. The starting point is going to the field plugin catalog in the SurveyCTO Support Center. You'll find the list of all the field plugins that we have published. And then within there, you'll find a link to the GitHub repository for each field plugin, and you can download that zipped file. Most of them come with a sample form. You can download the sample form, upload this to your server, and you'll then be able to actually work through them, look at how they work and things like that. So essentially what we are saying is from the catalog, download the field plugin, upload it, attach it to your form, and you are pretty much ready to go. And that basically moves us to the first part of our demo. So our first demo is going to be simply that: finding a field plugin, downloading it, and then actually installing it. So I will switch over here to the field plugin catalog. This is in the support center. And this just lists out all the field plugins that we have. Okay. Today, I will demonstrate the format symbol field plugin, which is under our simplified data input options. So I will just click on that to jump to this section, but you could scroll down there and look at what other field plugins we have that are available. Okay, so the format symbol field plugin basically solves a generally universal problem. Whenever a form collects a number with a unit attached, so money, weight, temperature, you want the unit to be visible to the enumerator so that the person collecting the data knows I'm collecting a currency, I'm collecting weight, and so on. And so that's basically the addition that this field plugin gives. So if I come here, you can see that I've got this format symbol field plugin, and I can actually click on this documentation to read more. I can download the field plugin. I can download the sample form. So I'll click here to download the sample form, the field plugin. So you see that the zip file has been downloaded. And then I can click here to download the sample form. Again, you see that the sample form has been downloaded. When we click on the documentation, so let me just come here, click on the documentation. It opens up basically GitHub, which is where all our field plugins live. So here you can find more details about the field plugin. You can see a screenshot of what that would look like, a description, the features that it offers, the data format, and how to use the field plugin, and so on and so forth. In our case, we don't need that information. We know already what, and we are happy with what we have. So I'll just jump into my server and I will upload the files that I just downloaded. So I'll come here, click on upload form definition, and I will come here and select that sample form. And then I will attach the field plugin zipped file here. So I'll click this and click that and just click upload. Give it a couple of seconds. The form will be uploaded and we can actually almost immediately test this. So if I come here and click on test, this should be able to load the form and show me what the field plugin is actually doing for me. So okay, so this is just your starting page. And when I go to next here, I can already begin to see what the field plugin does. It comes, I've got a normal text box here, a normal label, normal hint, but I can see that now my field has got a $sign here. So if I'm collecting currency, I can put in a currency there. And that's a simple change in the appearance of the field that makes it more useful. Okay, so that's our ability to find, download, and install the field plugin. It's really as simple as that. All right, let's move on. We are able to find and download field plugins, but what if we want to create our own field plugins? And this is where the exciting bit comes in. We want to be able to create or maybe even customize an existing field plugin. We don't like the colors or we want to change something about it. And SurveyCTO has invested quite a bit of time and would like to introduce the output of the time that has been invested, which is the SurveyCTO AI agent skill. Okay, this is the latest step in our work to make survey design easier and easier. So some of you might be familiar with our AI form tools that are available on SurveyCTO, and also the AI assistant that can help you with reviewing your forms. And was our first foray down the path of AI. And what these agents do is just take that to another level. So we'll specifically look at how this skill helps us to create and customize field plugins. And these, like we mentioned, are two areas that historically needed you to have some coding knowledge. And that might have been an obstacle for people who are not very tech savvy. But now we want to see how we can move that from that technical world into a natural language world using AI assistance. Okay. Now, the skill that we're demonstrating here is not just for field plugins. It can also help you design, edit, and troubleshoot SurveyCTO forms and Data Explorer workbooks. But for today, we will keep it focused just on field plugins. Now, before we get into seeing this in action, we obviously need to talk about what is a skill. Maybe not all of us are familiar with this. Now, if you think about AI assistants like ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, these are very, very capable. And some of you might already be using these for some of the tasks that you're doing with SurveyCTO. They have read a lot, they can write a lot, they know how to reason, and they can write very good code. But what they have is generic knowledge. They don't have specific knowledge. So what a skill does is it's like packaging a briefing about a particular organization or a particular thing that you can pass on to the AI so that it becomes an expert in a particular area. Okay, so it allows you to get your AI to become a specialist in a particular area. So the SurveyCTO skill, for example, contains everything the AI needs to know about SurveyCTO. how an XLS form is structured, how surveys, how the survey, the choices, and the settings worksheets work together, the rules for writing expressions, what field plugins are, and so on and so forth. So once you give this skill to the AI assistant, stops being a general helper with general information about SurveyCTO, but it becomes a SurveyCTO specialist to be able to focus on that. Okay. Now, skills are not something that's specific to SurveyCTO. Most of the tools that you're using have got certain skills in them. Your AI assistant, for example, has got a skill that allows it to interact with Excel forms. And so it knows how to interpret Excel forms. It knows how to create Word documents. So there are different skills that you can give. So SurveyCTO will be that skill that we add on top of AI assistant to make it a specialist in SurveyCTO. Okay, so that is what we are going to demonstrate. Once AI agent has this skill, how can it now begin to use this particular skill to allow us to build a field plugin? All right, so I'll jump into my AI tool here. I'm using Claude for this particular demonstration, but skills are available in Codex also. So you can also use this in Codex. And for those that work in the command line, skills are available for the command line also. But here I'm going to use Codex to demo what we have. So what I will do is I will give Codex a very basic prompt. I have already installed the SurveyCTO skill. The skill itself is just a zip file that you upload to your LLM and it knows how to handle that. It passes information. It's structured in a way that the tool knows how to handle and process. So that's what you would do. You would upload it here, and we have steps for that in our documentation. But what I will do here is I will paste in a prompt. I'll start the prompt here and then explain it because it does take a few minutes for this to actually happen. So I'm starting the prompt now, and it's going in and beginning to build this. But what is it that is in the prompt that I have created, that I've given it? Okay. What I've asked it to do is to build a SurveyCTO field plugin from scratch for an integer field. I want a 1 to 5 mood picker showing 5 emoji faces, sad to happy. And the respondent taps to choose what emotion they are currently experiencing. Okay, so save the chosen number 1 to 5 as the field answer and make the buttons large and mobile friendly with a clear visual indicator border or background showing which face is selected. Keep it minimal. And then I've also asked it at the end here to build a basic sample form that I can use to test this out. Okay, so hopefully some of you can already begin to see this. I want to go to a field, see some rectangle there and see 5 different faces, happy to sad. And I want to be able to click on one so that I can then say I have selected this particular mood. So whilst the prompt does its thing here, I just wanted to emphasize some things. First of all, LLM outputs vary every time you run them. So, I'm running this time. If I were to run it again, the responses might not necessarily be 100% one-on-one. Okay. Each time the model runs, it generates a fresh code. Okay. So, just make sure that you review the results that come in. So, okay, Mofia did this and it worked, or John did this and it worked. They might not be 100% the same. So always review that. Secondly, related to that, you need to have this mental model when it comes to working with LLMs. Think of it as a junior technical collaborator. So they're very fast, they're very capable, but they're still somebody whose work you need to review. Okay, so you need to look at the results that you get, test them, make sure they work for what you're asking it to build, and then you can let those out in the world, make them available on production. So the same standard that you'd apply to any new team member, you want to apply to the LLM. And then thirdly, again, you're talking to an LLM, so be mindful of what you're passing to it. Data privacy is very important. When you're building a field plugin, you're generally not passing anything sensitive. So if you look at what I described here, there is no sensitive information in it at all. So most of the time, that should not be a concern. But depending on the complexity of what you're working with, this is something that you want to keep in mind. So for sensitive workflows, look at what your organizational policies are so that you can make sure you are within those particular policies. But what does this mean? As you can see, I just described this. In fact, I actually described this with a lot more detail. You could be less detailed than my description here. So essentially, a project manager, an M&E lead can come to the LLM, describe what they would like to see, build that out. And maybe then go to a developer to say, can you review this? Can you check this for any red flags? So instead of asking the developer to spend 1 week building something, you would build that and they would spend maybe 2 hours or 1 hour just reviewing the work. So that makes it a lot easier. So I just wanted to highlight those as this build is taking place. Just to highlight what's happening here, obviously the LLM is keeping track of what the information that or the processing steps that it's going through. So it says I looked for my XLS form, which is how we structure our Excel form. So it looked for that information. It understands how that looks like, and then it got the information about how Field plugins work and understood that, and then it says, okay, I'm going to build the plugin, package it, and then I'll create the sample form. So it went through all of those steps and actually validated the process and came up with a final product. So this is usually a good sign. It means our product is ready. So if I was just to close this and maybe just read through quickly what it has created. So the different pieces that actually highlighted: the manifest file, the template file, the style file, and the script file, and then a sample form. And then it has zipped all of those together into a zipped file. So you can look at the individual files, but in this case, we'll be most interested in the mood picker here. So I'm going to download this zipped file. Okay, and then I'll just save it to my computer. And then I'll also download my sample form and save this to my computer. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so I can then go back to my server console. I'm here in my server console and I can upload those two files. Okay, so let's come here, select this, and then, okay, that's our sample form. And then select this. That is our field plugin that has been created. And I'll click upload here. And fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan. So let's come here and test it also. So let's test this. So we'll load this and we'll see that, okay, we've got our first form there, our first field. Okay, so this is just telling us this is the form that demonstrates the mood picker. So you can see that it understood how to develop the sample form. And so I come here next and there we go. So we do have this SurveyCTO field. Remember, we said it's an integer field. So in the backend, this is actually just an integer field. But we've changed the appearance of this integer field such that we can actually have this nice presentation. And so I can click on 2 here to select that. And if I go forward, it actually tells me that it selected 2. Okay, so and it's tied into the entire SurveyCTO ecosystem. So if I click this, it's able to jump back to this field. And if I select the 4 there and go forward again, it will tell that's what's been saved there. So you can see how easy it is to start from scratch, give some instruction, and we actually have a field available. And then in terms of customization, again, obviously I could go in and build something different or pick up something from our catalog, but it's a lot easier to just try and do some modification with this same field plugin. So I'll add in another prompt here and then fire it up. And what I'm just saying here is like, okay, so you've created the mood picker, but change the face so that it has a clear green background. Okay, so if you noticed previously, it had a blue background. Now I want to have a green background. So that's a change that I would like it to make. And so I've sent this to the LLM, and it's doing its thing. Whilst we wait for that, Shirley, I don't know if there's any question. We can pick up one question or two whilst we wait for this to finish.
Yeah, I think this is so exciting to be able to see. Normally, if you were running this yourself, you would likely do another task while the LLM is thinking about the output, right? And I also wanted to call out that the words you're using are just natural language. I'm not a technical person, and I would be using the same sort of language to describe what I need. And the LLM is able to give me an output fairly quickly in this instance. And I think for the
Yeah.
current
Yeah.
questions, we've answered them thus far. We just got a new one, but I don't know if you want to run through the updated field
Yeah.
plugin first.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so it's done with that change, and it tells me a little what I've done here is that when the mood is selected, I have changed the border color to another color. Again, if you are not interested in this technical language, you don't even have to look at it. You just come in and download the updated version. So I'm going to download this. To make my life easier, I'll replace the old one so that I don't get myself confused. And then I can come back. And what I will do is I'll try and leave this old form here open. And I will jump over back here. And what I will do is just update the form. And instead of updating the entire form, I also want to show those that work using the form designer how you can make these changes to the Qt plugin file. So I'll go into edit for our sample form. And then I will just click on form settings here. And then I'll say manage attachments. And okay, so it tells me that I've got mood picker and it's version 1.01 of the field plugin. So let me come in here, select a file and attach the new version here. And you can already see it recognizes that the new version is 1.0.1, which has got those particular changes. So I can save this and I can either save and deploy, or I can actually immediately test it. Okay, so if I click on this test, I can see, I can try to see whether those changes have happened. Click on next here, click on next here, and it looks pretty much the same. But if I click on this, you can see now that my background is green. Okay, so that's the simple change that we made there. And you can compare it with the previous one. So if I go back here, and you can see that here, our background was blue. And so we've been able to make that customization, that change, so that our field plugin is what we expected to see. Okay, so that's a very basic. We are happy to dive into further discussion around this. But just to sort of close it off, I just wanted to touch on a few practical tips. Okay, especially now that the bar is much, much lower. There are a few things that you need to keep in mind when you are testing or when you have created your field plugin. So first of all, it's to think about the scope. The field plugin scope is within a field. So each plugin controls a single question. It doesn't necessarily see the other questions that are in that form, and it can't reach into the other questions that are in the form to influence them per se. Okay, so if you expect that there will be interaction with your field plugin with other results in the form, there are ways to do this. Field plugins support what are called parameters that you can pass to the field plugin, so you can capture the result in another field, pass that result to your field plugin, and it can work with that particular result. But in general, you want to remember that the scope is per field. And then we already hinted at the fact that these work on specific field types: text, integer, decimal, single choice, multiple choice questions. So if you want to work with media files, so images, audio, video, there is a limitation in terms of what you can build to target those. But the workaround usually is to build a field plugin that controls the workflow. So it controls the instructions, the timing, the validation, and then use a normal field to capture the actual media, the actual image, the actual audio, and so on and so forth. And then plugins, like Shirley mentioned, they return very simple values, the same values that are there. So if the return type is complex, you probably don't want to build the field plugin with that. But again, there are multiple workarounds to that. The fourth and most important, I think, is that you must test on real devices. When you build the field plugin, yes, I was showing this in the browser. It worked just fine. If your data collectors are going to work on the mobile device, you probably want to make sure you download it to the mobile device, see how it displays there. If possible, use the exact device that your enumerators are going to use. I can't overemphasize that. It will take you maybe 5 minutes to test it. That can save you 5 days of debugging if they go out in the field. So just test it on a real device. Where to from here? Please feel free to look through our field plugin catalog, pick up a field plugin, install the skill, and test it. You can customize an existing field plugin. You can use a field plugin if you haven't used it before. But yeah, I think that's all I had, and I'll hand it back to Shirley to close us out, and then we can jump into the questions.
Thank you so much. That was a really great demo, really exciting to see. I just think it's so cool, for lack of a better expression, to see this in action. And I mentioned this before, but I am a non-developer, and being able to create something where historically you would have needed to know a little bit of coding, right? But being able to do this using a chat interface, using language I'm used to, I think this does really make the technical barrier to entry a lot lower. And I wanted to see if I can, let me pull up the chat. So everyone, I want to do a temperature check. I'm curious how you all feel about the AI agent skill. Do you feel like you could also use it to spin up a plugin of your own? Great. That's the goal. We want to have more people being able to try this out. So on that similar topic, I'll add that, if you give this skill a try, let us know. Like, email us or tag us on LinkedIn if you're having fun with it or you created something cool. And I'll also add, we just talked about in the previous slide, there comes a time where even with the skill, you might have invested too much time into creating the plugin that you need, and it's not quite right. You can always commission us to create one on your behalf. We've worked with users all the time on this, so you can always reach out to us. So now, to get to this slide, you may be asking, how can I give this a try? Well, we will send out the link with the recording and slides afterwards, and there are a few things that I want to call out specifically with that. So first, as you can see on the slide, this skill is in public beta, which means we want you to test and provide feedback. Secondly, this skill is it's optimized for desktop agents, not cloud-based chatbots. So basically, you do want to download Claude Cowork or Codex to use this skill and not rely on the browser-based Claude or ChatGPT chatbots. And lastly, for those of you who are more familiar with skills, we do recommend that you use this in conjunction with the MCP server, as it really does meaningfully enhance what the skill is able to do. For those who are newer to skills and just want to dip your toes in the water, you can just use a skill. Both the skill and the MCP server are supplied in the link that we'll send out. I wanted to quickly mention that we have other resources about how you can customize plugins with text editors or IDEs for those who are more familiar with coding. So we can also send that out. But we will be able to send out everything, recordings, slides, links to the agent so you can test it out probably next week. So please be on the lookout for that. And if you have any questions about this, or if you wanted to give SurveyCTO a try, if you're not currently a user, you can reach out to us or start a free trial. But thank you all very much for attending our webinar, and hopefully you learned something new about how you can use skills to create plugins today.